And I think just helping them kind of learn the beauty in meeting new people and making new friendships and how important that is, kind of giving them that diverse experience and exposure. Just kind of walking it through with them, making sure that you understand that different children are going to want to embrace that at a different pace.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Demme Learning Show. I am so excited to welcome my sweet friend, Natalie Mack, to talk about military families because their journey is different and it is an amazing experience. I'm a former military wife, and I wouldn't have traded the 5 years that my husband and I got to spend in the military for anything. But we didn't have kids. And so life gets more complicated when you have children. So Natalie's going to join me today, and we're going to talk about what it's like to homeschool and be part of the military. And we have so many things to talk about. I think the hard part is going to be keeping it to an hour. And now, Natalie, will you please be so kind as to introduce yourself? Welcome.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. I'm really excited to be here. We've been talking about this conversation for a while, so here we are. I am a retired Navy chaplain spouse. My husband retired 2 years ago after 34 years of service. We have been homeschooling for 23 years. I'm a mom of five. So far, we have, thank the Lord, launched four to college, very different paths. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we have an 11th grader at home. I work for HSLDA as the Military Outreach Community Coordinator. And I've been in that role for a little bit over 3 years. I started there as a high school educational consultant and then pretty much started to actually develop and create their military outreach program. It's been a blessing to be able to use all of my experience in the military homeschool community to pretty much create what I wish I had had years ago if I was, in that situation. So I also am president of Fort Belvoir Home Educators in Northern Virginia. I also have a homeschool consultation business, Natalie Mack LLC, as well as a new nonprofit that's in the mil spouse space. It's Military Homeschoolers Association. And I'll be launching a podcast soon for military homeschoolers. It's base and then the number two, base military homeschooling. So my ideal guest is going to be that military homeschooler on an installation. It could be from Okinawa to Hickam to Camp Lejeune, and you're going to be able to tell me all about your life as a military homeschooler there, co-ops, resources in the community, just to be able to be a vehicle to share the information about life in these different installations. One of the main questions I get is, what is it like there? Anyone stationed there? Where are the homeschoolers here, right? So that's the goal of that podcast. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you have listened thus far, you get the impression that Natalie never sleeps. This is probably why we get along so well,
Yeah,
is because when we met at HSLDA Leadership Conference last year, I knew immediately we were going to be friends. We both kind of run life at 100 miles an hour, and
yes,
so that you can see a kindred spirit in someone else's eyes. So
exactly. I love
I
that.
want you now, I know the story of how you all decided to homeschool, but I want you to share that with our families because I think it's always helpful to know someone else's journey.
Yeah, so you probably saw my TEDx, right? The impact of homeschooling.
And you know
And
what?
it
We're going
has,
to also include that in our show notes because I thought
okay,
that would be a
great.
really, I've never had a show note with a TEDx in it. So I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
going to be
great,
a
great,
great
great.
inclusion.
I think I'm over 12,000 views, and this month is the year anniversary. So I'm really blessed and thankful for that. And so we were living life as I was a licensed counselor. My husband was working for Johnson and Johnson Medical. We have a testimony of prior Army, and we talked a little bit about that. And then God called him to the ministry. And then, long story short, I could tell you that in another story. Like you said, we could go for over an hour, right? And so, but we were life was good, and we were happy. But I started to meet homeschoolers, started to feel as if, you know this is something I needed to look into. I just felt that tugging, and but we were comfortable with the school. We were able to afford a private Montessori school at the time, and I just felt like if I just volunteered a little bit more, things would, it would be even better. And but I kept, that feeling, and you hear other homeschoolers say, I'm running from homeschooling. I don't really know what it is. I'm running away from the idea of starting to homeschool, and then God keeps putting homeschoolers, like they're dropping out of the sky, right? Yeah, yeah. So right? And so that literally was it, along with the fact that we just felt like we needed more time with our children, and we noticed our youngest daughter um, being a little bit more excited about her daycare provider, who happened to attend church with us, than myself. So there were just some little things that God just kind of started to show. And he placed us in a situation where we got orders. We entered back into the Navy, and we got orders to California. And I felt God saying, okay, what are you going to do now? Like, okay, you're going to have to get your license for reciprocity, right? As a counselor, you know, it, all the things, everything's so much more expensive in California. So it was just all these things that were ruminating, and I just felt like, okay. And I talked to my husband, and we prayed, and here we are, 23 years later. So with 5 kids. And at the time that we moved to California, we were expecting our fourth child. He arrived about 2.5 weeks after we got to Camp Pendleton, first time with the Marine Corps. And we have boxes everywhere, like most military families. You move, and all the boxes come, and then you look around at each other and figure, okay, we got to get to work and get these unpacked. But nope, the baby was coming. So yeah, so military life, always one big adventure, right?
Right. And I wouldn't have we moved 13 times in 5 years, and I wouldn't have traded that for anything. But I didn't have to pack up kids and do that.
Yes.
And we got out when 2 weeks after my first baby was born.
Okay.
So life changes,
So you
and
missed
it
that part
does
of the
change.
fun.
I did miss that part of the fun. And there's a small piece of me who misses that in a different way, because when you're on a military base, you meet and create friendships so
Yes,
very
you do.
quickly,
Yes, you do.
um, because time is short.
Yes.
So I would like to hear from you, with your background in counseling, a military, because I hear from families who say, oh, we're military, we've just gone to a new base, we're having trouble finding friends. So what is your advice? What do you say to a family who's just relocated to a new base? How do you find and create those relationships expeditiously?
Yeah. So I first want to speak to this and say that I recognize it's not easy. And depending upon your personality, as you probably can tell, I'm extroverted, but there are introverts in this world, and I love them dearly. So it can be a little bit more of a struggle depending upon your personality. But there's a few things that I always talk about, and I do a workshop called Bloom, Uproot, and Replant. And so this idea of blooming where you are planted. And for some, it's harder to do that than others. But I feel as if we're going to constantly be moving and getting these orders. So we have a choice to make about what are we going to do each time, right? We're going to have to push in and figure it out, and we're going to have to find community. So one of the ways is, of course, now with the presence of social media being what it is before you even actually relocate, you can get, can touch base with those family members and spouses on social media. Most installations have a spouse's Facebook page. So I always say just do a quick, hey, any homeschoolers here? You'll get plenty of responses because military homeschoolers are everywhere. And then once you get there, start to find the community, like if there are co-ops on installations, like at Fort Belvoir here, we have a large homeschool co-op and a homeschool support group, really. And so just get plugged in, your neighbors if you live on the installation. I know increasingly I noticed that the what I call the old military, where everyone knew everyone in a neighborhood, is seemingly less so. Now we don't live on installation anymore, but when we did have a close community, but it still was a little less close than years ago, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of times military families, we're so busy, and we aren't thinking about making those connections, but it's so important. And if you don't, military life can be so much more challenging than
Mhm.
without connections. And so it's just making that choice and finding the people, finding your tribe, and hopefully your tribe is the same as your kids' tribe, meaning, the moms and the parents and the kids. It doesn't always work out that way, but a lot of times it does. And that makes it really nice, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I love the thought of finding a tribe because,
Yes.
and many of my talks talk about the necessity to find a tribe, but it's even more important when you're a place where there is no family, when
Yes.
you've been uprooted and how to learn about that. How does that change then to help maybe I mean, I'm an uber extrovert. I've given birth to kids who identify themselves as ambiverts.
Yes.
My husband's more extroverted than introvert, so we'll talk to a post.
Yes.
But what do you do when our personality is not our children's personality, when that child is more
Yes.
introverted? How do
Yes.
we make those connections for our kids?
Yes, that's a challenge sometimes, right? Because we see life through who we are, our lens, and it can be frustrating. I remember growing up, my mom was an extrovert, and I remember, I don't know, at some point I was an introvert, and I remember in high school I switched, and I've been an extrovert full speed ahead ever since. So, but I remember she would just kind of kept putting me in situations and environments, and eventually things click. Not that it was bad to be an introvert. That's not what I'm saying. I think we all, God has given each of us our personalities, and that's all fine. But when it's different than our children, it's when we have to really dig deep and have patience, and we have to recognize that how that child is wired and created is good, even if it's different, that God has given us as parents all that we need to be able to find a way to merge and find a way to work with that child, recognizing who that child is. So you never want, at least in my opinion, to have your child feel like the parents just, I don't understand you. You're
Or
not
pushing?
quite, yeah, pushy, right? And so, but at the same time, parents has, typically we have the wisdom to know that maybe the child needs just a little bit of a push, but also maybe finding friends is getting connected into activities and events. A lot of
Mhm.
times it's this thought of, if you say, "Oh, go find friends, go outside and find friends. Look at all the kids outside. They're out there waiting for you." And the kid is like, "No, they're not. I don't know them. I'm scared. How do you know they're looking for me? They're not, right?" And they just
It's
kind of
funny
get
you should
scared,
say
right?
that because
Yeah.
even as an extrovert, if you were to say that to me, I wouldn't be going out the door to go, "Hi, I'm
Right. I'm here. I'm the new
here."
kid, right? You know, and the reality is all of those kids have lived the same life that your child has, meaning they got there because they moved there with a sponsor who got orders, and they didn't have a say in it. They just had to go. And
Mhm.
so military kids are mostly very friendly and very definitely resilient. We talk about the dandelion, right? And so we really they really have a capacity to adjust really well, but that doesn't mean that we just assume that they are going to adjust. Right. I think we need to check in with our children and make sure, okay, you're okay. How is this move going to go? And just allow them to kind of unpack what that looks like. Maybe talk about what we're going to do when we get there. Maybe find out, oh, we're going to go to the library and see if there's activities there. We're going to check out community center and see what's there for us. Just kind of maybe, I think, journeying alongside your child instead of so far ahead as an adult. We are like already there, right? We got the
Sure.
orders, went from penciled in to definite, and okay, we're already there. Like, let's go, right? And sometimes our
Right.
kids aren't. They're like,
You've got
no,
your agenda of all the
yeah.
things that have to be, but talk to me a little bit more about how do you have those intentional conversations? Because
Mhm.
I know as you all moved, how would you
Yes.
check in with your kids to say, are you good? How are you feeling about? Because I'm sure not every move has the same degree of joy and anticipation with
Yeah.
it.
I can think of one move, and it makes me laugh, but okay, I'll go ahead and share it. So we were overseas in Naples, Italy, and somebody had to go, so we were happy to be chosen, right? And we loved Italy, right? We loved Europe. And we got orders to Eastern North Carolina. Now, please, if you're from Eastern North Carolina, don't feel badly about me saying that, okay? Because I am a person that loves just about everywhere, right? So, and I loved Eastern North Carolina, so I will say that. But our children were like, "Why?" Like,
There's not a
"Why?"
scale there that would
Like,
balance
you're right,
well.
like, and they struggled with that. We had our 3, youngest, which were all boys, still at home. Our 2 girls had been launched to college, and they were like, "No, not no, no, why?" And they just struggled a lot. And I remember that when we got orders to move, which was back up to the Washington, D.C. area known as the DMV, they were excited, like, "Oh, yay, finally," right? But we also I'm one of these people, as you probably can tell, get very involved, right? I can do it. Let's go. Let's find it. What does the library have? Um, and so we just did that and made it what we did. Like if we had to go to Wilmington, which was like an hour away because we wanted to get books from New Hanover Library, we did it once a month. We
Mhm.
combine, all the places that Wilmington had that Jacksonville didn't have shopping wise, and there was a trampoline park, so they had a homeschool day, so we kind of planned it for that and all the things. So, but I think just kind of slowing down and recognizing it was okay that they were not okay with Jacksonville, right?
Mhm.
I get, give them permission. It's okay. Saying we still have to go, we still have to move, but it's okay that you're not okay with it, and it's okay that you're happy we're now moving, right? But it was just
That
the
is a little
adjustment was too big.
microcosm of adulthood, isn't it? Because there's
Yes.
a lot of things that come into our lives that we're not okay with, but we still have to do. So,
Yes. Yeah. So true. Exactly. Yeah, and that's
so
the military. There's a lot of places you get orders you don't want to go, right? So
I have to say we were very fortunate that we never had that experience in those 5
good,
years.
good,
But,
good. Yeah.
still,
Yes.
I'm sure if we had stuck around, it would have eventually come around to the
Come
point where it
around to
would not have been. So how did you frame for the boys? What were their ages at that point in time?
let's see here. So we had a son who was beginning 11th grade. I remember the grades, and let's see. And then our next son would have been, let me see, starting probably about what, 6th grade, I think. And then we had a 6-year-old. So a spread.
So
Yeah.
that
So
11th grader, that had to be particularly hard because he had
yes,
created a social environment that he was now
exactly.
going to be pulled out of.
Exactly. Yes. He was playing on and one of the benefits, our children have all loved soccer. Our oldest daughter did 2 years and then she said, "No, that's not for me." But all the other 4 have loved soccer, and overseas with Dodea, military homeschoolers can play on they can, try out, and if they get selected, they can play on the Dodea high school sports teams.
So what
So
is Dodea?
oh yeah, sorry, Department of Defense Education Activity, or some call it DoD schools, basically.
Right. Okay.
Um, yeah, so DoD has a school system. They used to have a lot of them in CONUS, or continental U.S. here in the states. Mostly, there's a few like Camp Lejeune has one. I think Quantico, West Point. I think they have Dodea schools. But most of them are now overseas because, of course, we are Americans, English speaking mainly. I mean, I know there's other languages that people do speak, but in general, that's our language. So the Department of Defense has to provide a vehicle for education for all of these families that are getting orders overseas, accompanied orders, meaning the sponsor gets to bring their family. And so as a result, Dodea allows homeschoolers to take advantage of like taking 3 classes. They can do the AP, they can do the SATs, PSATs, all of that. And they also can do clubs, they have access to the library, and they can play, like I said, on the sports teams at the high school level. So both our youngest daughter, who ended up getting picked up to play D1 at Liberty, we went through the NCAA process over in Naples, Italy, and then she launched to college. And then our oldest son, the one that I just referenced, who was 11th grade, both of them got to play on the high school team. So he had that experience of, I mean, they were traveling to Vicenza and traveling to play the American School of Rome. And we were in once a year, we were in Germany in K Town and Kaiserslautern for what they call Europeans. And we were all over. And as a homeschool family, my son and my daughter would get on the bus with the team to go to the destination, play, and then we would scoop them up because what? We homeschooled. So, of course, we're going to explore Germany. Of course, we're going to stay a little bit longer in Vicenza and explore
Of
all of
course.
that, right? And, you know, Sigonella, right? We drove down to the tip of Italy and got on the ferry and went over and watched the games that they played in Sigonella. It was like this type, we were all over Europe, literally.
Sure.
And so thankful we were able to do it. And that's what the adjustment for him was, coming from that to
Coming to the United
yeah,
States, right?
coming back to United States. And it would have been a hard adjustment just about anywhere though, to be fair. I think um and I love the
Particularly
United
as an
States. I'm not at
11th
all,
grader.
yeah. It's right, right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about your daughter being a homeschooler and going through the NCAA process to get into Liberty. Because I have parents who ask this question of me, and I don't always have an answer for them. And I think that that's very interesting. What did you have to do differently to prepare her to make that college experience happen?
Wow, that's a multi-layered question. I will, yeah, and I love it. It's good because one of the things that I want to make sure I let homeschoolers know is that don't throw in the towel and stop homeschooling because you have a child who wants to play college sports. It is doable. It is possible. Homeschoolers are doing it all of the time. Now, this was in what was it, 2012 when she graduated high school. So it's been a while now. But
Mhm.
one of the things I do is I do speak on NCAA and do workshops. I just was in Georgia for the Flourish and talked about NCAA. And so more and more families are reaching out because they want to understand the process. So there is a homeschool toolkit. So when you go to NCAA Eligibility Center, you just go and download the toolkit. It tells you everything, but it can be a scary process because you have a student who says, I want to play. I want to play in college. And you, as a parent, a homeschooling mom, typically, right, is saying, I don't want to mess up. I'm scared. I
Right.
don't understand the process. Are you sure it works? Can you help me walk through this toolkit to understand everything it's saying? Because it sounds like foreign language to me, right? And so I try to help families in that respect. And HSLDA, we've put together a PowerPoint. So I was traveling and doing that workshop. I did it for Chia last June in California, and so anyway, and we do, yeah. So it's I just try to help families realize that it's possible to do it, and a lot of it is just following. All of it is really following what they say. Like, and that's for homeschoolers can be a little bit because we're so independent, right? We're so
We don't
independent.
stand in line well.
We
I
don't
used
stand
to
in
laugh.
line.
I
Yeah.
used to laugh that you could always tell the homeschoolers at the zoo
Yes.
because, here were all the classes standing in line and the
Yeah.
homeschoolers are wandering
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah, yeah, we're exploring, and what's that? And, "Oh, mom, look at this," right? And so you're right. So as parents, we're kinda like that too, and we're used to like, "No, I wanna do it this way. I wanna homeschool this way." And which is totally fine, and
Mhm.
the NCAA doesn't restrict how you homeschool. They're very accommodating. They recognize homeschoolers wanna play, and they are very welcoming to homeschoolers, quite honestly. And that's why they created this toolkit. But I do tell families now they recognize and they want you to come and play. They want you to become eligible for um, but recognize that you need to do it their way, right? So
Right.
just follow the toolkit and it's separate. Eligibility is separate from college admissions. So I
Right.
just that makes sense, but then sometimes it doesn't. And
Yeah,
families have said,
and
"Oh,
it is, and I was a homeschooler back in the day in 2004 when my daughter got ready. Well, 2003, she started taking the SAT, and there was no block to
yes,
check that you were homeschooled
yes."
back in
So right,
2003.
yeah,
I remember the SAT administrators scratching their heads going, what are we going to do? Where are we going to send the
yes,
results? How is this going to
right,
happen? And,
right,
by the time kid number 3 came along, there
yes.
was a block you could check that said that you were
Yeah,
homeschooled.
yeah.
But,
You can identify with, right.
yeah. Yeah, but
Yes,
I think the important part of that message, Natalie, is that as parents, we have to be as diligent in studying the process
yes,
as our children are diligent in in their academics.
Yes, exactly. Totally true. I agree.
To
Yes,
now,
and there
did
is
your
a
daughter
process out
then
there.
graduate from Liberty?
She did. She did graduate from Liberty, and then she got picked up about a year later to play in Verona, so she went back to Italy. Um, and she ended up practicing, the Italy is interesting, so I love Italy, so I will say that, but it is a little chaotic sometime, and the rules aren't really rules. And so they didn't have, they meaning the Italian team had never really welcomed an American player. So there are rules that they didn't know. So she ended up not actually being able to play in a game. And so, but she was there in practice and she did get selected. So it was a good experience to some degree. But she now plays um, for a team here in the area. Like on the weekends, and then she does futsal, indoor soccer as well. And matter of fact, she started to play with a friend who played with her on the Naples Wildcats soccer team, who ended up being in the DC area as well. And so they connected and ended up being on the same indoor team, and they were teammates in Italy. Crazy,
So
isn't it?
now talk to me a little bit about what it was like to prepare a child for college when you couldn't exactly do the typical college visits. You all were still in Italy
Right.
and you were
Yes.
preparing her. So what kind of homework did a parent have to do? Particularly as a homeschool parent, because there's a little more homework there. You don't have a guidance counselor to sort of point you in a direction.
Right. Yes. Yes. So, um, well, for the sports piece, well, let me back up. Our oldest daughter, we were in Virginia Beach and we got orders for Naples, Italy. And she applied to Regent University
Okay.
because at the time she was thinking they have a great online program and she wanted to accompany us to Italy. So I was like good with that, right? You know, as homeschoolers, we're like, we're not really pushing them out the nest, right? So, but
Correct.
I knew I wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet, but I wanted her to be able to come with us as well. So that worked out perfectly for her. So her first year was a Regent University online. When we got overseas, a lot of installations have partnerships with like University of Maryland. I think it's called Global Campus now.
Campus. Yes.
Yeah. So it was University College years ago. And so she was able to then take in person classes that were held. They used like the high school building for classes. So she had like a combination going for a while. And our youngest daughter, prior to going overseas that summer, she had gone down to UNC Chapel Hill. Now, if you know anything about women's soccer, Chapel Hill is like, it's, you know, it's if you
Right.
go there and you love it and you get picked up, then you're on your way, right? And she went there and had a great week, but a not so great week. And she came back and said, That's not for me." She said, "But I would like to check Liberty." And so she went to the next year. We were overseas that first year, and she applied for their college bound soccer camp. So we all hopped on a flight on a Space A. Uh, um, on a hop, right? And
Sure.
uh, so space available for anyone that's like, what is that? So we hopped on and made it to Dover, rented a van, got back down to the DC area, went to Liberty, did all these different things. So in that process, with her touring Liberty and attending the soccer bound camp, our oldest daughter took a look at Liberty and said, I'm missing this experience on a college campus. I feel good here. And so she applied and got accepted, literally. So it was, so that's how they both ended up at Liberty for totally different purposes, different majors, uh, different experiences. The life of an athlete is a serious commitment,
It
especially
is.
at the D1 level. You have to really want it because you have to be able to survive with all of the requirements and
There's a
demands
lot
on
of
your
plate
time.
spinning that
It's a
goes
lot of
on.
plates spinning, right? But it was great experience in many ways for our daughters, and but totally different experiences because of their different
Mm.
paths. So I would say, you know, you're overseas and it is a lot more challenging, right? It's a lot more
Right.
challenging to, and so if you do get an opportunity to travel back and jump on a hop, a lot of families, that's what they do. They make it over the summer and they go. Now, the summertime, you get a little bit more, a little different experience on a college campus and you do when school is in session, even though they do have summer classes at most universities. So if you can go a little bit earlier, you get a full, like you can see, okay, this is how it is in the
And this is
cafeteria,
how
right?
crowded it might
This
be
is
and all
how
those
crowded,
things. Yeah,
right, right. And this is
right.
that, yeah, all the options you get to really see what life is like. So
Absolutely. So we talked about this before the episode began, and so I want to make sure that we talk about this before we move into talking about the questions that parents submitted. And
sure.
that is, how is life different for a family when they have a child who learns differently in
Yes,
the
yes,
military? And so
yes.
I would like you've got so much depth and breadth of knowledge here. Give us
Yeah.
some insight. How do you make that
Yes,
happen?
yes. So what I think we were talking about too is the number of military families who are choosing to homeschool and children who learn differently, right? And I applaud these families because ultimately you have to see this, you have to make a decision that's best for your family. And if your children are potentially not getting the needs met, then you do have to make a decision about what you're going to do about that. And if it's not working, they are tending to choose to homeschool. So how are they doing that? Well, there's two ways. Some school districts allow uh, homeschoolers to get assessed for learning differences, right? Through their local school. From what I understand, because we did pursue speech therapy for both of our sons, and our middle son had visual impairment. So we were an EFMP family because of that. And so, having said that, we did go through the local school for one son, and then for this last one with speech therapy, we were told, thankfully, that as a homeschooler, we were kind of going to be last in queue. Like
Mhm. Sure.
if and if my son needed twice a week therapy, as a homeschooler, more likely he would just get once a week in the public school because quite honestly, they're allocating their resources to the student who's enrolled in as a public
Sure.
school student.
Absolutely.
And I hear people saying, "Oh, we pay taxes and all," and that's a fight you that I mean, people say that, right? But the reality is still the reality, right? And when someone's telling you that about your children, then you have to figure out what can I do to get the services that they need. And so thankfully, our PCM, our primary care manager, went ahead and put in a request through TRICARE, which is typically the
Sure.
military insurance, and we were able to get services through a civilian provider, which was the best decision ever. Doesn't always work out that way. So in the
Mm.
end, get what you can get rather than nothing, but recognize that if you can advocate and ask for your PCM to consider putting in for outside services. And we were able to say that actually, when a school counselor did tell me that your son would be kind of last to get. So that was helpful. I took that info
Sure.
to my
That
PCM,
information is
right? And the
all information
PCM,
is good
yeah,
information. Just
all
depends on how
information
you
is
use it,
good.
right?
So, yeah, and so a lot of families that will have the children have learning differences, and they are starting to homeschool, and these children can learn. It's not, I don't, I sometimes I hear families say, "Oh, well, my child has this or that, and so that's why they can't learn." That's not accurate. That's not accurate. I think sometimes that's the message we want to believe, right? Because it is a little bit of a harder um, mountain to climb, right? There are more things to do if you have a child that has some learning differences, but it's not an impossibility. And I feel like as a homeschooler, you have more ability to really address those and find the way to help your child learn than to hear a public school say, "Oh, your child can't learn because of learning differences." That's the
Right.
message you pulled away from to embrace being able to help them learn, right?
I
So,
love that line.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
message you pulled away
way from,
from to
right.
help them learn.
To help
Yes.
them learn. And so don't allow yourself to believe that. Maybe you were told that and you believe it and you feel like, okay, I just don't want my child to be bullied or anything like that or misunderstood. So I pull them out to keep them safe. That's all great. But they can also be pulled out to learn, right?
Sure.
You can do both.
Sure.
They can be kept safe and to learn. And don't underestimate. I mean, it's amazing. Children can do so many things, and most kids come ready to learn, even with differences. You just have to seek help, get support, get evaluations, get in a community, ask questions, and be an advocate Do not just believe anything you're told, even about your child. You know your child, so advocate to get what they need. So that's my soapbox.
No, I love your soapbox. I have a 25, well, he'll be 25 on Thursday, son who was told when he was 8, he wasn't college material. He wasn't
Mm,
going to be able to learn effectively enough to go to college.
yes,
And
yes,
he's a systems engineer with a degree in computer science. And we just
yes.
chose not to receive every diagnosis we were handed. So,
I understand. I understand, and look where he is, right?
yeah.
So, yeah, definitely.
So we had so many good questions. So I wanted
Yeah.
to
Okay.
go through some of these questions to see if you can provide some guidance because you have such a depth and breadth of knowledge. You bring not only the experience of a military family, but you also bring a counselor's hat
Yeah.
to the table, to sort of parse some of these questions. So
Yes.
one of them is about how do I'm going to throw you a softball. This one's
Okay.
easy. How do
Sure.
homeschoolers get information about the military if their students not part of junior ROTC? And I know the answer to this, but I
Yes.
want you to tell us this so that other parents will hear this.
Yes. Okay. So if you have a homeschooler who's interested in learning about how to join the military service is the question, right? Well, that's another one of my soapboxes that I do. And we were just talking
No,
before this,
I
right?
knew it was because of our conversation last winter or last fall. So
Yeah. And so, I advocate for homeschoolers for their transcript and I advocate with HSLDA and then I advocate personally from my own experience that homeschoolers transcripts count, right? They are good enough, they are acceptable. And a lot of families are concerned about that. There's a myth out there, and some of that myth is based on some real situations where a young person, a homeschool student has said, I want to enlist. And maybe there's a recruiter who says, oh, no, we don't accept your transcript. Or, homeschoolers, we don't really want you. But that is really not the reality. And so if a family encounters that, I always say, for one, contact HSLDA because they have attorneys who handle that. And then I am on the other end working with the Army and the Air Force and all these powers that be to train the recruiters, the ESSs, which for the Army, that's Education Service Specialists. They go out to
mhm.
conferences and promote the Army opportunity. So helping them understand about homeschooling and that so that they can talk intelligently to homeschooling families about their life and the homeschool student's journey. And they can look at this student and see, wow, all this potential. And they take these, you have to take an ASVAB, right? Armed Services, what is it, Vocational Aptitude Battery,
Right.
I think.
Yes.
They have to take that, and the higher you score, the more opportunity you have for different MOSs, military occupational specialties, more jobs, right? So if you want to be around, work with planes and potentially fly and different things like that, there are ways that people will enlist and then become an officer. So there's so many routes there. And I talk about enlistment. I work with West Point. They have, homeschool admissions. I just met about a couple of months ago with University of North Georgia, which it is a military college, which is similar to
Right.
VMI, Virginia
Mhm.
Military Institute, right? ROTC, where you say you want to go to a certain college and you don't want to go through the military college route or a West Point or Naval Academy, you can join ROTC and get money and get potential opportunity to be commissioned. So and then the National Guard. Say you want to stay in your neighborhood, your home, right? For different reasons, but you want to serve. National Guard is
That's
there
a
for
great,
you.
I hadn't thought of the National Guard. I
Yeah,
guess I
that's
have
yeah,
discounted that, but yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah.
makes it. My husband's a military school graduate, so
So you
um,
understand? Yeah,
I do,
exactly.
and he says that he paid for his education. He
Yeah.
graduated from the Citadel, so
Yes, the Citadel, right.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, very much so. There's like about 5, I call them 5 tracks, and so and each one is different, and each one requires something differently. The Military Service Academy one is probably the hardest one
sure,
because that I equate to applying to an Ivy League, and but homeschoolers do get accepted. So
Yes,
again,
actually,
don't believe that they don't.
I have a friend's daughter who will be graduating from the Naval Academy in,
Hmm.
well, a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Not long
See?
now.
Right, right, exactly. It happens quite often. So yeah.
So so those 5 tracks would be then Military Service Academy, ROTC,
Yes. National
um,
Guard,
mhm,
military college like VMI or University
uh-huh,
of North Georgia. There's several of them, and then enlistment.
sure, and then
Enlistment,
enlistment. Okay,
right.
all
And
right.
they're all completely different tracks. And you can go from enlistment to the officers corps if that's something that you want. There's processes to do
Sure.
that as well. So really just depends. A lot of families whose students want to pursue military service academy, we call them MSAs, they want to pursue that. They also kind of have like a ram in the bush. Like they kind of like will also look at what schools have ROTC, and
Mhm.
they have that as a backup because the reality is there are only a few slots at the MSAs for freshman class, incoming class.
Oh,
So you may get a no, but it's not because necessarily because you were homeschooled. It's just they can't accept everybody, but
right.
homeschoolers do get accepted.
I think what's also important here is, as a parent, our goal is to equip our children for life. So I
Yes.
would suggest putting a little skin in the game and letting your kids do some of that research as well.
It's
It's not all
definitely
on the parent
no,
to
no,
figure it all out.
right. Totally
That
true.
burden
Yeah.
needs to be shared, so to speak.
Yes, 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 because it's really important for the students to understand what the requirements are. Like a student that wants to says, "Oh, I want to go to US Air Force Academy. I want to be a pilot." Well, there's a process that you have to be willing to submit to and complete. Are you willing? And the student needs to be willing. The parent, it doesn't matter what the parent thinks. The parent could be a graduate of the Air Force Academy. It does not matter. It's the student that has to do all that work. There's a lot of work there, right? Physically and mentally, and academically. And so the student needs to know that. Enlistment, you need to know that the military, it's looking for, people who graduate, right? Don't feel like you go get a GED. No, no, that's not what they're looking for, right? They're looking for people with a transcript. So I always say, and I learned this from Carol Becker. You probably remember Carol Becker, right? She's a guru consultant with HSLDA for a long time. She's no longer works with us, but we love her dearly. And she would say a transcript is the best gift. So I kind of have segues to that piece is to just get that word out there is if one thing you can do to finish well as a homeschooler is to give your student a transcript, not
Yes,
years later, not when they need to call HSLDA and get help because they didn't get one. As part of finishing, give them a transcript,
right.
right?
And I will say, just as a plug, we did an episode last November about the transcript process and preparing your child for a post-secondary experience. And
Yes.
I will include that webinar in the show notes
Good.
so
Yes.
parents can reference that, because that's
Yes.
not something you start when they're a senior in high school. You
No.
need to start that well in advance.
Yes.
Like we recommended in the webinar that we did, that you start as a 7th and 8th grader looking
Ye-
at what that is and start guiding
Yes.
choices and
Yes.
preferences.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. I agree.
So, how do you manage kiddos when they have to keep making new friends because they keep moving? And
Yeah.
I know this from a personal basis. I have to say, one of my dearest friends for almost 40 years is one of the first friends that I made when we were first stationed in Germany. And we're still good friends, but
Yes.
there's effort that needs to be expended there. So, as a
Yeah.
parent, do you guide that effort?
Yeah. So that's not an easy question, right? I think that you can encourage them to get the contact info when you're getting ready to move. Ideally, I think the best thing too as a parent is to make sure you have the parents' info because, like that, for example, our area code is 757 on my cell, and it's been that way forever, you know. And so wherever we move, it's still 757. But clearly, we're not in the 757 zone, so you can find the parent versus your child trying to keep track of the student, right? And as they get older and change addresses and relocate and emails are different and all of that. But the parents, we tend to kind of keep the same thing. So you can help them and kind of maintain that contact as well. And I think just helping them kind of learn the beauty in meeting new people and making new friendships and how important that is, kind of giving them that diverse experience and exposure. Just kind of walking it through with them, making sure that you understand that different children are going to want to embrace that at a different pace and that they're not, you know, going to be harmed if they are slower than maybe a sibling to connect with new people and at a new installation. A lot of times, children, like one of our daughters, she kind of was like a watcher. Like she just kind of was near me for a while, but oh my gosh, now like she's just and she was the soccer player who just did her thing on so they develop into who they're supposed to be if we just kinda be the coach, right? And kind of be the support and give them a little nudges when we need to, but,
Sure, and
I
I
think,
think
yeah.
part of that be the coach is to have those intentional conversations of how do
Yes,
you have a conversation with someone who's new? If you
yes,
rehearse those kind of
yes,
conversations at your breakfast table,
yes,
it's easier than when they find themselves in that
yes,
situation. It's not
yes, you
so
could model it, right.
there's not that kind of hesitancy.
Yes, 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 and it's you're relaxed. You can make it a game, right? And, within your home, and just give them the opportunity to learn, and then they watch how we do it too,
Right.
right?
That's
They
true.
watch how we do it too.
They did a lot of
So,
education is
yeah,
caught, not
yeah,
taught, is it not?
exactly. And homeschool children are, I mean, they're home where we are, right? And so they get a whole lot of us and they get a lot of opportunity to watch how we do things. And so it's interesting. You'll see a lot of yourself in your children. So just pause a moment if you get really frustrated because it's probably you that is what you're looking
Maybe.
at, right?
No,
Maybe a little bit. Maybe a
I
little
don't
bit.
know what you're talking about now. Ah, okay, so toward that end, now let's go to the practical end of the spectrum as
Sure.
far as
Okay.
now we've talked about the emotional. Let's talk about the practical end of the spectrum. When you are a military family, particularly like you were, military family with multiple kids of multiple ages, could you
Yes.
have it all? And I know
No.
what the answer to that is.
Yeah,
So,
no.
how do you prioritize what's most important?
Oh gosh, in terms of activities, for example, and things like that, is that what you would say? Yeah.
I think I'm asking a little bit of everything. So,
Okay. Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
home life together.
Right.
I get the distinct impression from all the conversations we've had that you had really promoted that your kids had each other's backs, that your
Yes.
kids love each other and look out
Yes.
for each other.
Yes.
And I
For
find
me,
today
yeah.
that I don't always hear that from families that I have conversations with.
Yeah.
So how can you, as particularly as a military family, because when you move to a new location, all they've got is each other.
Right.
How do
Right.
they how do you
Right.
foster that? I guess is the
Yeah.
question
I
I'm
I
getting
think
to.
I think a lot, quite honestly, is a lot of it is like my personality, I think, but I think that you can be intentional about it as well. So, for me, I am a bonder. So, I wanted our children to bond with each other. I mean, one of the things that I was looking for in homeschooling, and one of the things I felt God was blessing us with the ability to homeschool was for this family bonding concept, right? That doesn't mean that they like each other, that they don't argue, and that they don't think, oh, you took the last slice of pizza, and all the things, right? So that happened, right? And even sometimes I probably was like, "Oh, don't fuss about that." I probably did say that. If I could hear my kids, they would say, "Mom, you didn't even like that either." But but they knew I didn't. You know what I'm saying? But I knew it was something that happened. So we would talk through a lot of those type of disagreements. we would focus on how you treat people. We're a family of faith, so that was definitely
Sure.
key, and times of Bible study, times of just talking about how God would have us treat people. We embraced and look forward to meeting a lot of different people and seeing different things and experiencing different aspects of life. And so we just kind of lived life fully. And I think that that allowed them to feel comfortable. I remember that for our youngest daughter, for example, when we were overseas and she was on the soccer team, and they, like I mentioned, would travel to a game, and there was there was sometimes, well, it was a mindset, I think, that a lot of the teammates would have was, oh, let's kind of do whatever so and so wants to do. Like, when they had downtime, oh, let's go do this. And it was kind of like this group movement, this
Hmm.
groups think.
Sure.
And as a homeschooler, which I think she may have been the only homeschooler, maybe there was one more, but for sure, I think she was only one for at least two of those 2 years, 2 or 3 years. And so for her, she was very like, Mom, I was comfortable making my own decisions, right? And I was like, wow, that's what we want. That's what we want. Because I am raising adults, right? We're not raising children. They are children. We're raising adults. So for her to be launched as, an adult on a college campus, I needed to feel that she was comfortable, being who she was and confident and okay if her choices and her decisions and how she saw things were different than the rest of them, especially going from one team to now being on a college campus and a team and playing at that level. There's a lot of stressors and demands and everything. And so I think that that was, yeah, we just kind of, for our family, it was just important. It was just very important what we talked about. Yeah, this
So
is
what
what
kind
we,
of advice do you offer to families as far as choosing curriculum? And I mean this in the greater context of, there's so many choices available. I laughingly say to this to parents at conferences. When I
Mhm.
started homeschooling, you could have stuck everything that was available as a resource in a single aisle of a typical homeschool conference today. There are so many choices, it's hard to discern. So do you offer to homeschool families in your advisory capacity, do you say these are the important things and then these are the additional things, or how do you do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, definitely for subjects and all and trying to find curriculum. Yeah, there are what we call the core courses, the main things, and then you have your electives. But I always tell high school to me is an exciting time, right? I recognize I hear people saying, but it's so stressful, right? And I hear that. So please, when I say this, I'm not pie in the sky kind of, Pollyanna thinking, oh, it's all great. I realize that there are lots of things that you need to get fairly right depending upon where your child wants to go. I recognize that, right? But at the same time, I think that it's just this canvas that the student, with your help, can like paint this beautiful, right,
Sure.
outcome. And I always tell a lot of families, college is one outcome, one next phase, but it's not the one for everybody, right?
Sure.
There's different next phases for different types of children and different paths that God has them on. And so I think that I always recommend that you homeschool to college because it's the hardest one to catch up, right? But so you have everything you need. And then at that point, if you don't need all of it, you just offload, right? But to
Right.
try to onload it, it's going to be hard. And so having said that, just focus on what the students' passions and interests and help them know who they are, help them understand what they like to do. A lot of times they don't know. You may ask a ninth grader or even an eighth grader planning for high school, like, oh, what do you want to study? And they're like, I don't know. Well, as a parent, there's some core ones they have to do. And then just start exposing them to different ones that can count as the elective. And then maybe find extracurriculars that complement that learning, and they will start to develop and see who they are. But I think it's really about being intentional as a parent to give them those exposures. And as a homeschool family, wow, like you can see, like from years ago to now, how many resources there are for homeschoolers. Like
Sure.
even in small towns, there's something for a homeschooling family, right? May not be as much as here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, because there's a lot, right? But there's enough to involve, from 4-H to, um, like we have a beta club here at Fort Belvoir. We have a 4-H club. We have a chess club. There's just so many things. I created a DC Explorers Club, which is
Uh-huh.
super popular. It was this idea that we're in this near this metropolitan area, and let's give homeschoolers at 13 and above to join this club, and they get to form teams that plan once a month an outing into DC. They
Oh,
sometimes
that's
will
really
do
cool.
Alexandria because it's
Sure.
smaller city, but they go into DC and they have to plan the whole thing. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Oh, we're going to get on the metro from here to here. How much does it cost? What time? What metro? What train are we catching? Oh, we're catching the 921 train. Everybody has to be there by 9 o'clock. Bring your smart cards for the metro. Like, are we going to eat lunch there? Who's doing what? Bring your lunch. We're
You know
sitting
what I
out on
love
the lawn
about
of the
that
monument
is
or what?
that's so much more than a club, because
Yes,
what
it
you're
is.
doing is you are incorporating what you said earlier is we have to teach them to be adults.
Yes, it
And I
is.
think that makes
Yes, you're
so
right.
much of a difference.
I hadn't
And
thought about it, but you're right. Yeah, thank you.
yeah, you are. Congratulations. Look at that. And so if you don't have that where you live,
Yeah,
maybe this is the opportunity
yeah,
for you to create that.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, there's
Maybe.
that
Yeah,
possibility. If you
there's that
can't find
possibility.
what you want, I mean, my husband and I sat on a board, a high school co-op board for 6 years
Mhm,
because we wanted to see that co-op continue. And
mhm.
uh, truth to tell, I didn't want to teach high school math.
I hear you,
I
right.
worked for a math company, but I didn't want to teach high school math. So
Yes,
I had a vested interest in making sure that co-op
yes,
continued. But
yes,
I think
yes.
that there's a difference there as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Natalie, we're almost to the top of the hour. So
Okay.
what have I not asked you that I should have asked you?
Oh my gosh. Oh, there's so many things. I'm trying to think of what you have not asked me. Let's see here. One of the things I have done too that I think we can talk about real quickly is the school liaison officer. I want to make sure I put a plug in for that. So,
Okay.
a school liaison, we call it a SLO, SLO. The Air Force calls them school liaison program managers. Um, and a lot of the branches now just shorten it to an SL, school liaison, right? But either way, they do all the same job basically. Each branch has this person or these 2 or 3 people. They are assigned to installations. Their job is to serve military families uh, in the arena of education. So whether you are choosing the DoDEA school, if the installation has one, DoD school, right? Or you are choosing, it's a county school that is on the installation or whatever it is, right? Homeschoolers, all right? They service the military homeschooler as well. And so uh, I've been doing a lot of training, the Air Force and Army, Marine Corps, Navy. They fly me around or have me jump on a Zoom. And at the headquarters level, I'm training in all of the slows. And so I am honored to do that. I have had, as a leader, even when I led the group in Naples, Italy, and now here at Belvoir and other places, I've had great relationships with this person at these installations, and they have been great in facilitating resources for our community. And so that is one of the things that they are really good. They are basically this liaison between the garrison command and you, the military homeschooler. So they have access to resources for military
So I
homeschool
think that's
groups to
something I don't
use
think I
class and all.
expected is to
Yes,
find that
yes,
resource as a
yes,
homeschool family. I would expect
yes.
that as a resource for a family who was military with kids in school, but
Right.
to
They
recognize
service
that
us
that's a
too.
resource for a homeschool family as well
Yes,
is an
they service
advantage.
us. And they are looking for us because sometimes we are a little elusive. But yeah, so I love working with them. And I'm going to back to Germany in a few weeks. Matter of fact, I fly Sunday to the Panhandle to support a school liaison officer there for the Air Force at Eglin Field. She's actually the regional school liaison, but I'm going down to the Panhandle to Herbert Field Airfield and Eglin and supporting Gina Payton, who's the leader there of a group, military homeschool group there. And then in a few weeks back to Germany. This will be our second time going for the European Homeschool Conference. This is their third annual, and it's held in Kaiserslautern, K-Town,
Yes,
as we call it. So I'm excited to go support Michelle Seagren and her team there. So lot of opportunity, a lot of things that are happening in military homeschool world, definitely. So
that's
yes.
great. That's tremendous. Well, so if you had one piece of advice to share with military homeschool families,
Hmm.
I know, and this is a difficult question to
Yes,
even ask of you.
yes,
What
yes.
would the advice be that you would give? And I think I know what my advice would be, but what would be the advice that you would give them as far as their
Yeah.
journeys are
Yeah,
concerned?
I would say bloom where you plant it. That's something I always say. Military families, I know we move so often, and I know this idea of getting reconnected and adjusting again, and we've talked about this during this podcast, but it can be a deal breaker for so many families that they just are so tired of moving or they just don't know how to do it one more time. And you miss out on 2 to 3 years, right, of your life in that new location, right? Because you're living life. You're going to live it whether you stay where you were happy, or you move to the place you didn't want to be. You still are living. And there's things that God has for you to embrace, to learn, to experience. And so bloom where you are planted, even when it's hard.
I think that makes a difference for our families to recognize that wherever you are, that's where you are. So to
Exactly.
find and make the best of a situation,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
our family motto is Semper Gumby.
Yes. Semper Gumby. Exactly.
And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I
That's
think
it.
it's
Semper
always
Gumby.
important to recognize that we don't have to just say, well, it is what it is. That's one of my least favorite phrases.
Right.
I think it is what you make it. And
Yes.
I think that makes all
Exactly.
the difference in the world. I
Exactly.
want to
Yes.
thank you so much for joining me for this time. I've been so excited to have this particular adventure with you because I just found a kindred spirit when we met
Yes.
last
Yes. Much
September.
more.
And I think that this is just an absolutely tremendous opportunity for us to be able to figure out the world of the military homeschooler is
Mhm.
different, but it's
Yes.
rich and it's full.
Yes.
And don't
Yes.
say you can't just
Right.
because the
Right.
world is different. So
Exactly. Exactly. I'm so passionate. I love military families, and I'm passionate about supporting military homeschoolers. So I'm so honored you asked me. Thank you. Thank you.
well,
Thank you.
I think you are, as my husband describes me, someone who could thread a sewing machine while it's running. So
Probably so. Yeah.
and if you
Yeah.
need someone to carry those bags back to Germany, I'd be happy to volunteer for
I
that
would
as
love
well.
you. We would get in so much trouble. We would have a good time, I
It would be
think.
fun. We would
Yeah.
have a great time.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much for joining me. This is
Thank
Gretchen
you.
Rowe for the Demme Learning Show. Thank you all for joining us today. You can access the show notes and watch a recording of the Demme Learning Show at demmelearning.com/show or on our YouTube channel. Be sure to rate, review, follow, or subscribe wherever you may be hearing this, especially if you really enjoyed it. And we'll look forward to joining you in your living room again for a future episode. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.